Okay, so since I stopped doing Let's Plays about a month ago, my output has been practically nothing. I've been focusing a bit more on my DeviantArt stuff, but my YouTube stuff's been zero. So I decided I want to get back into doing this type of review, and before going back to every game and film that I've seen and played this year, I decided to review Remember Me. You might be thinking, why Remember Me when that game is a year or two old? Well, it's because I've only just got around to playing it now because, you know, the bad reviews at first, they were like, not a great game, but I saw it for a tenner, picked it up. But the game itself, I really have a lot to talk about with this, I think, because it's quite rare when you see a game with so much potential in one of its concepts and then just fail to deliver on every level with that concept. Basically, Remember Me is about a memory hunter. I don't think the game ever actually explains what that really is. But the main character has amnesia, which is the main driving force behind her actions. She's trying to get her memory back because it has been actually taken from her, which is an interesting concept, at least. So she's working with this guy who claims to have been working with her in the past, and he's gone up against this corporation that's been taking people's memories, and along the way she has this thing where she has to remix people's memories, where she uses this glove she has to jack into people's minds in a way that is never explained. Everyone just has these weird things in the back of their necks, and there's not a single line of dialogue that I can recall that ever explains it. And so you can connect into people's memories and go through a particular memory. You have to watch it through first, and then you can rewind through it and find certain pieces of information and tweak little parts of it to make things go out differently. So at one point there's this guy who you have to turn off the safety of his gun and then move a bottle out of the way so he uses the gun instead of the bottle, and stuff like that. So you kind of change the way they remember things to influence their actions in the present, which I think is an interesting concept. The problem is you only do it in the game like 4 times, and it's such an interesting concept, especially with the kind of moral questions that can be brought up about manipulating people's minds. Because, you know, there's a reason why mind control is typically used by villains and not heroes, because no matter what you do with any kind of mental manipulation, there's always a moral grey area that falls into, and it's so interesting a concept to go into. And the results of some of these memory remixes, it's not the best outcome, really. And the character's never called out on this. She doesn't even really feel remorse for it, except for one time. She feels bad about it, and that's for more personal reasons. I mean, it gets brought up a little bit at the end, but not enough to really meet the full potential, and that concept, I think, could have carried the entire game. Because the combat, they have this weird thing with the combat where you have moves that you place into a sequence of button presses to make up a combo, and these attacks can have different effects. Some of them will give you health back, and others can be used as super move cooldowns and stuff like that, so you have to place them appropriately, and that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, how does punching someone in the face one way restore Nillin's health, while in another way it cools down her super moves, and in another it just does more damage? It's a bizarre concept. It's okay, but it's not that fun to play through, especially when the game starts throwing loads and loads of enemies at you. Like, if you ever found the fights in, say, Batman Arkham Asylum or Assassin's Creed where they're throwing loads of enemies at you, if you ever found them boring, imagine that with a less well-crafted combat system that's similar but doesn't quite match up. It's not up to standard, and that's kind of the problem with the combat. And I think the memory remixing could have been a really good substitute. Like, make it more of an adventure game than an action game. Cut out the stupid platforming and get rid of the shitty combat and focus on this memory remixing thing. And so you could have a situation where some guards are trying to get you, and you have to use your power to remix their memories so that they're not after you anymore, or maybe so that they think one of their mates is the one they're after, or something like that. So you can turn them against each other or whatever, and it could be that the device you use for this has a cooldown on it, so if you're attacked by a group of enemies you might have to use the power on one of them, then hide until it cools down so you can use it on the other. It might have helped if it was just a power she had, instead of being this weird thing that's never explained. Again, not much about the setting is explained. Like, people have robot servants. There's like maybe one line that references that these things exist, and no one ever draws attention to it. I mean, it makes sense that they wouldn't, because it's natural to these people, but you'd think something that's in this universe that's different from our own would get some kind of explanation, but it doesn't. None of the technology does, and a lot of the stuff feels more like it would make more sense in some kind of simulation, like the stuff you would see in Saints Row 4. It even has some of that same kind of corruption effects, especially when you're on low health. And again, it's never explained. The boss fights are terrible because they're just powerful enemies that are boring to fight. There's usually no special strategy to it, you just have to wait until they're vulnerable, then hit them, usually with the super move, which means you have to beat the shit out of normal enemies to build up the super move. And again, the combat was just so problematic throughout the entire game. Another thing is that the game felt like it was way too long. Like, you kind of reach a climax about 5 episodes in, but the game keeps going for another 3. And there's really no reason to. And so much in the settings are explaining the enemies. Like, there's people who have, like, had their memories taken away and gone insane, I think. But some of them are just massive mutant people, and that's never explained. I know it might sound a bit repetitive, so I'll probably just wrap this up, but really not much about the setting is explained, and I think if they had explained it a bit more, you know, as in more than not at all, the overall experience might have been more fun and enjoyable. And if they'd cut the combat and the generic platforming, which sometimes refuses to tell you where to go, even though most of the time it tells you exactly where to go, and focus on the memory remixing, you could have had something really good. But what it ultimately comes down to is it feels like, gameplay-wise, it feels like a failed Arkham clone, and story-wise, it feels like a Final Fantasy plot. And even if you're a Final Fantasy fan, you can't deny that the majority of Final Fantasy plots are retarded. They are incredibly poorly written, and that's what it feels like. Also, just a quick discussion about the ending. So if you don't want it spoiled, you know, you can leave now. For one of Nillin's closest allies is beaten up and knocked unconscious / killed, and it's never clear what happens to him. Nilin just leaves him. Just leaves him to die in the typical laboratory self-destruct sequence. She doesn't even check if he's alive or not, she just leaves him. And in fact, she shows no remorse for her actions. It's just hard to find that likeable, but I can't find her unlikable. It's weird. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's the performance of the voice actress that makes her somewhat likeable, even if her character is a horrible person. And the finale was so fucking stupid. Like, the final boss wants you to kill him, but he fights against you, i.e. resisting against you killing him. I think the lines where he says, "I'll make you kill me, and if you don't, I'll destroy you," I think that's supposed to justify it, but that makes no sense. He's like, she's the only one who can kill him, and he's trying to kill her. If she dies, she can't kill you, you dumb shit. See what I meant when I said this reads like a Final Fantasy plot? Like, this is so much like the plot of Final Fantasy 13. It's awful.